Good afternoon. I have a tool here. That's what I want to talk about today. As beekeepers, we spend so much time worrying about varroa and honey production and why aren't the queens working and all of the things that can go wrong. And I just love drones. Don't you? Yes. And my wife reminds me that I'm a drone every fall. So today I want to talk a little bit about drones and some of the things that go on in the colony because of them and what the colony does to them and things that are going on in the world with drones. And this is going to be more fun. This is not hardcore science. And if you're here for hardcore, really in-depth science, come back when Dr. Seeley's here because he's really good at that. This is just fun with drones. So let's see where we can go here. You know, we just overlook them. When you're in your beginner's class, you learn to identify them. They're not the queen. Okay, I have to pay attention to not the queen, but it's a drone, so I have to find the queen. And that's pretty much the end of the drones in a beginner's class. They're not the queen, right? So my goal is to have you look at a drone and look at what it's telling you without having to do a whole lot. This morning, at the session this morning, they were talking about looking at what's going on outside the hive and what it can tell you. And here's something that it can tell you. And if you're looking at drones and you're looking at drones on the landing board, yes, you can see some of the things that are going on in the hive. And all you have to do is spend 5 minutes and pay attention. And I can't influence beginning beekeepers to do that enough. My challenge to a beginning beekeeper is to spend a half an hour doing that and learn all of the things that are going on. And this is one of the things that are going on. They'll tell you colony health. Are there a lot of drones? Are there drones on the landing board? Are there no drones on the landing board? Are there drones flying and coming back? Are there no drones flying? What is that telling you? And from my perspective, it tells me a lot. If it's the middle of July in Ohio and there are no drones flying, something's going on I need to be aware of. If there's lots of drones flying, there's something going on, and maybe I don't have to care at all because I'm pretty sure that things are going right. If there are dead drones on the landing board in the middle of July, oh, you have a problem. And now you really need to pay attention. So pay attention. What I'm telling those people is to pay attention because it's a good indication of the colony health status, also nutrition. We live in Ohio. We have this wonderful flush of nectar in the spring, and then we have this dearth, and it starts about the 4th of July and ends about, depending on the year, the first week in August, maybe the 10th of August. And you can set your clock by it almost, and I can watch my hive and I can tell you exactly what's going on because suddenly I've got drones on the landing board and they want to get in and they won't let them back. There's a dearth, there's not enough food, and who's the first one they sacrifice? It's us drones. But when I see that, Tom was talking this morning about the numbers of foragers, and people will tell you scale hives. I can tell you what's going on in the hive by looking at how many drones are on the landing board. I don't have to weigh it. I don't have to count them. All I have to see is drones are outside trying to get back in. There's not enough food. That tells me I need to be doing something. So what more can a drone? Well, they're a gene transfer system. Of course, they're the descendant of the queen only. So if you have a good queen, then she's going to be producing good drones, or drones that you probably want to propagate. So there is right in your hand you can hold the future of your apiary or the future of your beekeeping industry, if you want to look at it that way. And that's how we should be looking at it. There was a lot of talk this morning about not enough queens produced in this country. And there's half of the problem is that you have to have enough drones. No. You have to have enough good drones. Not enough drones, you have to have enough good drones. And we're going to look at that in a minute, but that's the future of your industry, is what's those drones that are sitting on your landing board. They're a heat sink and a cluster, they're big and they're fuzzy and they're able to help regulate temperatures in a cluster. Of course, you don't have a lot of drones going into hard winter, but right now in Ohio, we've got drones in our clusters, and they are on the outside, and they're doing a wonderful job insulating the bees on the inside. And thank you very much, drones, for going through all of this. Your days are numbered. We won't tell you that, but pretty soon they're going to say, okay, enough of this, we're not going to feed you anymore, and they kick them out. But right now they're a heat sink in our early winter cluster, and we like seeing that. They're cute. I mean, look at me, right? And here's something, if you want to see a cute drone, here's what you can do with a drone. Have any of you ever done this? Oh, you got to try this. This is way cool. Gather some drones on your landing board. And I'm going to tell you, drones are so fragile that a bad word will kill a drone. I mean, they're just so fragile. So when you capture them, put them in something screened so that they don't feel confined and they don't feel threatened, because that'll hinder what you want. You want them in a big enough cage that you can transport them home and put them in the refrigerator for about 30 seconds. That's all it takes to cool them down and to slow them down. And then you take them out and you tie a sewing thread around that joint between their waist and their abdomen. Make it 20 feet long. You can walk them around the room. Once they start flying, you know what you can do in a schoolroom with that? You get 3 or 4 of these. You give one to a kid in the front row. You got to try this. It is the neatest thing in the world in a room full of kids. So if you haven't, or a room full of brand new beekeepers, you just walk over and you've got them buzzing around and you just hand them to that beekeeper. So you can take a drone to school and you can walk him around the room. And if you haven't done it yet, try it. And you know, this time of year, there's a lot of drones on your landing boards. You're going to be, it's easy to find them. Well, a little bit of biology. And you know what they say, if you don't know the biology, you're not a beekeeper, and I couldn't agree more. You have to understand the basics of what's going on and what's driving the colony. And if you're, as I said earlier, if you're hardcore, come back and see Dr. Seeley, because that's the biology, the hardcore biology part of this session. But a little bit about drone biology here we've got going. And you can read the little print, but large eyes. And you know what the large eye is for, because drones approach queens from below and behind, and they want to be able to see the queen above and in front of them. They're larger than workers and smaller than queens. They're raised in special cells, which we're going to talk about, and they have this short, blunt abdomen. And these are all of the things that when you're talking to beginners, this is the difference between a drone and a queen. Look at the eyes, look at the abdomen, look at the width, all of these things. But until you have them side by side, and have seen them enough as a beginner, you don't quite get that. You see big bee, you think queen. Favored by varroa mites. We can use that. In fact, we're going to use that a lot. And drones are a luxury. I mean, a colony is going to look at a drone or a drone population in a colony and go, you know, we've got this much food, and we've got this many bees. Who's going to go? The workers are gathering nectar, the workers are storing nectar, the workers are feeding the queen, the workers are taking care of the young, and the drones are eating our food. Easy choice. Drones gone. So they're a luxury. From a colony's perspective, they're a luxury. In the best of all worlds, the queen will continue living, and they will get through whatever emergency there is where there's not enough food, and she will lay more drone eggs, and her genetics will carry on with the next bunch of drones. So the colony's looking at the best of all worlds with drones, and I can get rid of this batch because we're going to get some more. Lately, that's not been the case, or at least in the States, that's not been the case. We've had troubles with drones, and we've had troubles with queens, and this is one of them, is that they don't last long enough. We're going to look at why in a minute, but from a colony's perspective, I could get rid of all of my drones today because next month I'm going to have a whole bunch more, because my queen can lay more eggs, more drone eggs, and we can produce more drones. So drones are a luxury. If we don't have enough food, they're going to go away. Guess what? And from a drone's perspective, as I said, every fall my wife reminds me that I'm a drone, and guess what? So a bit about workers, just to compare them. They're the most common members. If you were here for Dr. Seeley's talk this morning, I learned a lot about workers. You learned a lot about workers. Sisters can differentiate sisters from half-sisters. And I find that fascinating in a lot of ways, is that a worker will feed a sister larva if she has the opportunity before she will feed a half-sister larva. She will feed a sister queen cell before she will feed a half-sister queen cell. So depending on how well the queen mated early on, what her children are doing with the rest of the bees in the colony down the line will determine to some degree, and perhaps to a great degree, how much the colony is like the drones that the queen mated with, and how much influence they had. If she mated with a whole lot of drones, one would hope 20 or 30 or more, and they're seeing those kinds of numbers in good times. She's going to have a lot more diversity in her colony, and that favoritism is going to play a much smaller role than if she mated with 4. And that's one of the problems we're seeing with mating with 4 drones in some of our queen production yards. There isn't enough diversity. There aren't enough drones. There aren't enough healthy drones. And this is part of the problem that we're running into and where we are. So you get sisters that are genetically identical sometimes, and some of them are hybrids, and you want both. And you want the hybrids that have the good traits, and you don't want the hybrids that have the traits that aren't. On a little bit of biology on queens, I said they may mate with up to more than 20 drones, and in the best of all worlds, they're finding it is more than 20 drones. There's in some places significantly more than 20 drones. On way too many cases, it's significantly fewer than 10. And therein lies one of the issues that we're having in our country in terms of diversity in the colonies. So the colonies are way too similar and not enough diversity. And this is part of the reason, is that queens aren't able to find enough good drones. Beekeepers aren't able to produce enough good drones. Enough good drones aren't out in drone congregation areas because there just aren't enough of them out there. We've got drones who don't fly as far, fly as fast, and aren't able to mate, lagging behind, and therein lies the problem. So the queen, you know what she looks like. She mates with drones. She stores semen her whole life, and that is, we're going to get to a little bit of this in a second about problems with the colony as a whole. Things that affect drones also affect queens. Drones are different as adults, and there's a good side-by-side there, and we talked about the blunt abdomen and the eyes and all of that. And even if you're looking at the pupa and underneath, you uncap the cells, their larvae or the pupa look different, the purple-eyed stage looks different of drones and of workers. And one of the things that I want to talk about quickly is I heard this morning at that question and answer session that you have to import a lot of queens. Did I get the right message? Here, you have to because there's not enough queens produced in this country, so you were importing. Did I get that right? All right. One of the things, from a businessman's perspective, there's an opportunity here. Am I wrong? Somebody should be going into the queen rearing business. How much is a queen raise? What does a queen sell for here? In the U.S., it's about $35. What's a queen sell for here? How much? 35 or 40 pounds? That's close to the same. How much would you pay for a good English queen? 50 pounds? No? 35 or 40 pounds is as good as it gets. I'm thinking of going into the queen rearing business over here. I can see where there's an opportunity, because if you have to import bees and the problems that you're bringing in with them, you suspect, a queen produced in this country probably should eventually command a premium price. Am I right? So if you're going to do that, even if you're just raising your own, talking to somebody here earlier today, just raising their own, trying to improve the stock in their own apiary, These are some of the things that you take a half a step back and look at. What are some of the things that I want to measure in a good queen? One of them is eggs per day. How many eggs per day should a queen lay? I know we're talking about drones, but we're going to get there in a minute. How many eggs per day should a good queen lay? What do the books tell you? 2,000, right? 1,500, 2,000. How do you know? Sealed brood, good. So once you know that queen is raising this many eggs per day in the spring, summer, and fall, and she's got this sort of a pattern, then you can say, okay, this is a queen I want to continue with. Learning to, when I'm trying to teach people how to count sealed brood, you'd think I was pulling out teeth or something. They just look at me like I'm nuts. You can't do that. And I'm saying, yes, you can. It's quite easy. Cell phone camera. Take a picture of the frame, take it home, count it on your computer tonight. Well, you can do the same with drone brood. You can count drone brood, and you, instead of dividing your first number subtracted from your second number and dividing by 12 for queens, you divide it by 14.5, and that's going to give you drone eggs per day produced by that queen. Is it enough? And do you want more? And do you start selecting for queens who lay more drones than workers because you like that genetic line? And I don't know the answers to those questions from your perspective, but people are beginning to look at that. I want a queen that's making enough drones per day because these drones are working. This is the queen I want, and I have to have enough drones. So if I'm producing queens, I want enough drones. I want my drone producing colonies spread out all over creation, and I want my queens to fly to that drone congregation, drone congregation area filled with the drones that I want. And the only way I can get them is to have enough healthy drones out there. This is where you start. If you want enough healthy drones, you got to have the queen that's producing enough healthy drones eggs on a daily basis. So this is one of the things that a lot of queen producers miss. They have, yes, I have drone producing colonies, but how many drones? Now, if we're going to look at some numbers here in a minute, but one of the things that to consider is if you're producing 5 queens or 10 queens or 20 queens, then that's all in a series, then the numbers of drones that you are producing is relatively limited. If you're in Georgia in the United States, how many drones do you have to have? Or Northern California in the United States, how many drones do you have to have? And who else's drones are out there? And that's one of the things that you have to worry about, is who else's drones? That beekeeper 1.5 miles over there, is he raising queens? And is his drones any good? And is my queen mating with his drones? Yuck. So that's one of the things that we have to look at. Talk briefly here about a drone's life, and you're probably all familiar with this. They start out with the bubble, we call it the bubble-shaped cell capping. They emerge and they are fed, they are pampered, they are babied, they are, as I said before, they're a luxury. Once they're old enough, they're able to fly, they're sexually mature, they go out and find a drone congregation area. There's a trick. Where's the drone congregation? Is there one out here? Anybody got an idea? Where's the drone congregation areas in your area? And if you haven't found one yet, go looking next spring, because you'll be surprised where you might find them. We found one over an Arby's restaurant one time. We drove into the Arby's restaurant and we'd been out working bees. I was in southern Georgia and we'd been working bees all day, and it was tired and it was hungry and it was dark and it was time to go home, and we pulled into an Arby's parking lot, and I got out of the car and I put my foot down on the ground to make sure it was where I wanted it to be. I looked down and there were 4 dead drones right by my foot. Well, why? Then I started looking around, and there are more dead drones in this parking lot. Well, obviously we were sitting right underneath a drone congregation area that nobody, I am guessing, knew about. But here were all of these drones, and if you've ever found one, you're going to find all these corpses, and you know they all have a small smile. That is, unless they aren't fortunate enough to meet up with a queen in a drone congregation area, and they come home, and they just are. If the world is good and there's enough food and and life isn't too stressful, the colony will keep them along until they either die of natural death or it's this time of year and it's time to make them go away because they are consuming food and they have no value to the colony. So this is a drone's life. I mean, it can be short and simple and sweet, or it can be long and not too bad and have the retirement program stinks. But this is a drone's life, and this is the picture I have in the image I have in my mind every time my wife says you're a drone. So I'm thinking, okay. Well, identifying drones are different. Now I am working under a real problem. I have never seen a drone for an Apis mellifera. I've never seen one. So hopefully before I leave this week, somebody can show me one, so I know what one. I know what Italian drones look like. They're the pretty ones with a golden abdomen, and you can spot them, like without opening the colony. They just shine. They're that big and they're that pretty. And the Carniolans are dark, like the queens. They're a little bit smaller. They're a little bit harder to find, but they're still larger than anybody. But they've got this nice black, but a Carniolan queen and a Carniolan drone side by side, yep, I'm going to have to look twice to make sure that I'm looking at the right one. What we have, and what I heard here going on this morning, is we're beginning to have a lot of people who are selecting for bees that are alive. And the background mix is way less important than the fact that, yes, they're still alive. This is the line that I want to preserve. We've got one line of bees. Are there Russians over here, Russian bees? Well, you'd have to import them, but boy, I tell you, if you can get some Russian genetics in here, I really like Russian genetics, and they have a tendency to survive, and that to me is important. I have some Russians. I know a lot of the breeders. Very briefly, Russian bees wake up way late in the spring, like it's May before they begin to explode. And I like that because I'm on the road a lot in the spring, so they're late and I'm late. We both sleep in. They build fast in the summer. They do what they're supposed to do, and they crash population-wise in the fall. So do I. And they overwinter with like 11 bees in the colony, and that to me is good. But they don't like mites, and mites don't like them, and that to me is way more important than all of the rest of this. They don't make quite as much honey for me because of the season that I have and the honey flows that I have, but they're alive every spring, and I don't have to do anything to them. And to me, all of that outweighs how much honey they're going to make. I don't have to buy bees every spring. And then we have a lot of people who have small groups of people that are regionally producing queens. So we have one in Ohio, and there's West Virginia, and there's Maryland, and out in Colorado, and certainly in California. There's small groups of people that are trading queens and trading drones and finding out that, yes, these queens are surviving no matter what. And they've got some of the same traits of the Italians and of the Carniolans and of the Russians, and a little bit of all of that, but they're working together, forming small groups, and these are also surviving. Tom mentioned this morning the ankle biters, and that's a group out of Purdue University that are doing wonderful. If you've ever seen a varroa mite with all of its legs torn off, let me tell you, there's a poster for you. And that's what they're doing. They're pulling the mites off and they're destroying them. And I don't care how they do it, if they're shorter gestation or however they're destroying the mites, that they're alive next spring without me having to put poison in my hive. Everything else comes in third, and as far as that's concerned. Drones tend to be edgy. And by that I mean that they are raised in a colony right on the outside of the worker brood nest. They like it about a degree or two cooler than the workers to develop, and we can use that. And I've heard a little bit this morning about drone trapping. A lot of people here use that. A lot of people use drone. Really? Whoa. We trap drones for varroa control. That's one of our IPM things, we being Kathy and I. And this is, to me, by far the best way to deal with varroa, and this is how we do it. Because drones are on the edge of the brood nest, we can use that position to our advantage. And what we do is, I'm going to try and explain this without a picture. We run 8-frame medium equipment. Everything I own is an 8-frame medium. I'm an old man, and heavy is not in my picture anymore, so I like the smallest, lightest box that I can use. So we use 8-frame mediums. So about end of March, if we can get into a colony middle of March, if the weather's nice, I'm going to get an empty frame that the bees will put drone comb in. No foundation at all. And I'm going to put it in number 2 on the bottom, on the middle box of I have a 3-box brood nest of 8-frame mediums. Number 2 in the middle, on the middle box. A week later, I put it in number 6 in the middle box, the same kind of frame. Week 3, I put it in number 6 on the top box of the brood nest of the 3. I wait a week. I come back the next thing and I pull the first one and I replace it, and any comb that's in there, any sealed comb, it's got drone. It's going to have drone brood in it, and if there's any varroa, I'm probably going to find them that goes to my chickens. My chickens see me coming 100 yards away with that frame, and they like the wax, they like the larva, they like the varroa, they like the whole bit. But what it does is, and a week later I do the next frame, and a week later I do the next frame, and then we do this rotation. And I'm not going to say always, but often by the 4th of July, I can't find a varroa in my colony. Or when we do the alcohol rub, if I find one, I'm surprised. Never more than one. But it's because this is a religion. You don't miss a week. You don't go on vacation. You don't take a business trip. This is a religion. Because if you miss one, then you've created a varroa infirmary, and the population explodes. But you can use this. No poison in your hive. That's my goal in life. No poison in my hive. And this is a way to do it. And thank you, drones. I mean, like I said, the retirement program stinks. But from my perspective, the colony survives. And that's the bigger picture, and to me that's what's more important, is that the colony survives, and if we have to sacrifice a bunch of drones to do it, then I'm gonna do that. So things that are not good for drones, and this is one of the problems we're running into in the States, and probably everywhere the queens are being raised, is the association with drones and chemicals, the mite removing chemicals that we use in our hives. They're not only bad for drones or bad for queens, but they're looking at parts per million, and it's reducing drone longevity. It's reducing drones' ability. All of the things that you need to be a good drone. It's challenging them, challenging immune systems. All of these things that you need to be a good drone. That little bit of poison, and how I relate this when I'm teaching the beginners class. How I relate this to my beginners class is yeah, there's a little bit of poison in that hive. You know, parts per million. Maybe even parts per billion, but parts per million in that wax. But let me ask you this. Would you put your children to bed at night and pull a blanket up that was only parts per million poison? And that's the message, is there's poison in that wax once you start doing this. And my goal is to not have to do this, is not have to put poison in a beehive. And I'm not going to quit until I'm successful at never having to put poison in a beehive. All of these things damage drones. They don't kill them. And when you're looking at that drone on the landing board, and when you're looking at that drone in the frame, and you're looking at that drone brood in your colony, they look just fine, but they're challenged just a little bit. And that's all you need, is just that little bit of challenge, and they're not up to par. They're not doing quite as good as they could. And that's the problem that we're having in the States with good mating, is they're not quite up to snuff. So these are the things that are not good for drones. Any poison you put in a hive, the drone's going to suck up. And therein lies one of our biggest problems. Like I said, if you're raising queens, you need a lot of drones. And up to 20 drones, and maybe more, and if you knew the background of all 20 of those, you'd be doing really good. But that's what you want to do. You want to know the background of all 20 of those. You don't want to have to guess. I hope she's mating with somebody decent. You know, think about that for a minute. I don't want that. I want to know when I'm raising queens, I want to know every drone that she's going to encounter. And if she's going to encounter my neighbor's drones who does nothing and could care less, I'm probably going to move my mating yard. I'm probably going to find another drone congregation area because I don't want her. I want to take as much risk and as much error out of the equation as I can when I've got my queens up mating. Not 100% possible, but as much as I can. And I'm going to get back to that in a second. One of the things you can also use drones for, besides tying them to a thread and taking them to a schoolyard, is to check drift in your colonies. Have you ever done that? And you're going to find that if you've got 4 colonies, you're going to have drones from all 4 colonies in all 4 colonies. And this is what they do. What does that mean is that if you've got colonies that are having problems with Varroa and 3 that aren't, suddenly you're going to have 4 colonies that are having problems with Varroa, because they just like to share. They don't care, and if the colony's healthy and they're doing well, they don't care. They're going to feed a drone. They're going to feed a drone no matter what. So where that drone is from is less important than that it's there. As I said before, you can monitor colony health by looking at the population of drones. If you've got 4 or 5 colonies that have what you consider to be a normal population of drones in the middle of July, and you've got one that has no drones, what's going on? That's your cue to look further. And the perfect way to practice for marking queens. You know, and I'll tell you a story. I was teaching a beginner's class out in the bee yard a few years ago, and we did this. We went through all of our colonies in our bee yard, and we marked as many drones as people wanted to mark. And one of our students went home and marked all of her drones the same color, and then marked her queen the same color. So for a while, she had a lot of queens in that colony, but. And the minute she did it, you know, you know in your head that, oh, this is not good. But right in the corner of that road is my house. And when you are looking at, you know, this is Google Earth, and it is an indispensable tool if you're keeping bees. It's an indispensable tool. Find your house or find your bee yard and find where you want your bees to not be, and then get them someplace where they won't go there. And I know that sounds a lot simpler than it is, but when I'm looking at where my bee yard is and the corner of that road, I don't want my mating yard there, because I've got 2 beekeepers too close to me who don't care about what's going on in their bee yards. They don't care, and I don't want my queens mating with those drones. So I've moved my mating yard to where I want it to be, so that I can look at and not have to worry about where my queen's going to go. I'm pretty sure, you're never positive. I'm pretty sure that she's someplace where the drones she's mating with are drones that I know about. Some of them are mine, and some of them belong to other beekeepers that I know are doing a good job. I don't have enough bees to run 1,000 colonies and do all of the drone colonies. I wish I did, but then I wouldn't be here because I'd be home taking care of bees. But Google Earth is an indispensable tool when you're looking for. The other thing that you want to do is, if you can, start taking a look at Google Earth and where would you suppose a drone congregation area would be. And once you start looking at open fields and edges of woods, and high ground and low ground, and you go and you look and I found one. And then you say, okay, where's another spot like that? Well, lo and behold, there's another one. And you can begin to, using this tool, begin to look at, or at least have an idea where there might be a drone congregation area. And if you have the facilities and the resources, you can go look and identify the fact that there might be one there. This is the numbers that I was talking about, and this is out of southern Georgia, which is a prime queen producing area in the United States. There's 8 or 10 large commercial beekeepers there who do nothing but produce queens. They produce honey in the off season, but queens are their business. So something like 60,000 packages and an additional 20,000 queens come out of Georgia every year. Considering how many drones that number of queens need, you're going to have about 1.25 million drones every year have to be raised. Figure that out, go back to drones, eggs per day on drones on that queen, and are your bees able to produce enough drones to supply what those queens need? And it may only be 1,000 drones, but are you getting 1,000 drones where you are for the queens that you're raising? And that's, like I said, this is fun and not hardcore science. I hope something stuck. And do we have time for questions?
Yes.
How do drones find drone congregation areas?
I'm sorry?
How do drones find drone congregation areas?
How do drones find drone congregation areas? Good question. And because the drones from last season aren't here to teach them where the drones are this year, where those congregation areas are. And as much as I've been able to find out, and I've explored this question a little bit, it has to do with the horizon, a natural barrier such as a tree line or a cliff, and an open area. And some combination of those work. And if you take I've found drone congregation areas that didn't quite match that, but I know a guy named Norm Gary at University of California, Davis, who's probably identified more drone congregation areas than anybody on the planet. And in fact, about a month ago, I spent a couple of days with him talking about this very thing, because he discovered them by accident when he was at Davis, and then he spent the rest of his career intentionally looking for them. And his estimation is it has something to do with a barrier, an open spot, and that some combination of that. And now you know as much as I do, and probably we're all wrong, but that's what I know.
Thank you. 6 o'clock every day is my highlight, and I always get your blogs and things coming through. My question is, I like the idea that you're saying about trapping the drones to do the 3-week sections. What worries me is a lot of beekeepers, particularly in places like Australia and some beekeepers here, they deliberately kill off all the drones. And I keep saying to them, you can't keep doing that, because you're killing someone else's progeny because they're relying on your drones to come and do their queens. So what time of year do you start doing your drone culling so that there's plenty of drones for when the queen breeding season is around?
Yeah, the question is, if we're trapping drones to get varroa out of our colonies, what we're doing is we're eliminating our drone population from the mix in the drone congregation areas. And you are correct, and I don't care. How's that? Because I do have colonies that do produce drones because I want them to. And those I have to guard. It's Varroa watch intense on those colonies because of that very fact. I'm going to have Varroa and I'm going to have drones, but I need the genetics that those drones have. But for the most part, I don't want them in my colony. And like I said, by the 4th of July, we're usually done. I have to look hard for Varroa. I'm not going to say it never happens. And then you have somebody mentioned earlier today the Varroa bombs from perhaps one of my colonies that I'm not watching, which I won't admit, or from the guy over the hill that I didn't know was keeping bees. So it happens, and I have to continue to monitor that. But you're right. I am not contributing to the better of the whole by getting rid of all my drones. No, I do it right at the beginning. I do it when the queen is, if the colony's healthy, the queen, takes off, or as early in the season. I want the first drone in the colony that gets the first Varroa to go on that first frame, and she's not reproducing, and then the next one goes on the second frame, and then she's not reproducing. And like I said, after I've gone through that series about twice, sometimes 3 times, there's nobody left to breed. So I've gotten rid of all of the Varroa, darn near all of the Varroa.
So your neighbours have got no drones to mate with?
In that particular yard, but my mating yard is somewhere else. These guys are production colonies, and I don't want to put poison in those hives. I want my queens over here, distant from them. Yes.
You've not spoken about drone nutrition and fertility.
A good point. Honeybee nutrition, boy, I tell you, we could be here until, Thursday, Friday, talking about honeybee nutrition. But drones have a different diet to begin with, and once they have emerged, then their diet is different than what they're feeding workers, and their diet continues to be different. It's a little bit richer. It's got other components in it. And if your colony is healthy, they're making all of the drone food that the drones are going to need. What is it? It's a little more, as I understand it, it's a little more protein, but not much. Once they've emerged, their diet is pretty much the same as workers. It's that when they're in the larva stage that the diet is a little bit different.
Because you obviously need good nutrition for them to have good development while they're developing as a larva.
Yes.
Then you need good nutrition when they're actually sexually maturing to produce healthy sperm.
One of the components of watching what's going on in a colony of watching drones is a colony that's stressed, and a colony that's stressed nutrition-wise. The first thing that's going to suffer are the drones, because the colony is going to look at the big picture and say, okay, we can feed drones, but we really need workers to go out and collect more food for us. So I'm going to put my energy into feeding workers. So suddenly you've got drones on the landing board, or you've got not nearly as many drones because the queen has quit laying them. You're looking at drone brood, and I'll go back to drone eggs per day. Is the colony? I say this without hard proof, but with some observation. The colony is going to adjust the drone population relative to the amount of food available so that it is best able to survive. Drones are the sacrifice, and if there's not enough food, they go first, and then the youngest worker larva, and then the middle-aged worker larva, and then finally the oldest worker larva, and then the colony starves. But the drones are first. So if you're looking at drone population and you're seeing a reduction in this colony compared to the rest of your colonies, there's probably something going on relative to nutrition is one of them I would look at. Did that help at all? Did I answer that question? I'm not sure.
I think there's one question left.
Thank you for the interesting talk. Can you go back to treating the drones which you are intending to breed from or participate in breeding? How do you deal with varroa? Because you can't cull those drones. Because you haven't quite adequately answered that question. So can we return you back to that problem, please?
And maybe I'm not going to. If I was a commercial queen producer, I'd be paying much more attention to what I'm doing with my drone population, but I'm not. But the commercial queen producers that I know that do work hard at making sure that the drones that they're producing are coming from queen stock that they want to propagate. I mean, they want the queen is good queen. She's producing drones, and they want those genetics, and those are the pampered colonies, because I can't kill the drones. I can't sacrifice those drones for varroa control. So I have to keep the drones alive with poison, and therein lies the problem that the queen producers are having: is how do you keep drones alive with varroa without poison? And their answer is that what they are doing is they are bringing in drone brood for these colonies and letting them from over here and letting the colony finish them, so that they've got poisonless drone development brood over here, putting it into a colony with some poison in it, but their exposure is minimal and for a very short time, and they're pretty much 100%, and that works pretty well. But there's still poison in that hive, and that little bit of poison is a problem. But it's much less if your entire development time isn't covered in poison, just a very short period. You bring them in, you emerge, and they fly, and so the exposure is minimal. Not none, but it's minimal.